examinees would descend by the thousands to the imperial examination halls here in Nanjing, where just a few exam cells remain. Up until the last century, there were thousands upon thousands of exam cells here, covering a huge area. And here the examinees were tested on one subject only. The Chinese imperial examination system tested knowledge of these Confucian texts, and success or failure in that oldest of all civil service exams determined one's career in the Chinese imperial bureaucracy. Examinees would spend days writing down the classics from memory, eating and sleeping in their cells. Of course, sometimes their memories failed them, and the cheat sheet was born. Those who passed became mandarins. With this high office came power, wealth, and lots of paperwork. Mandarins spent most of their lives writing documents, often in multiple copies, in the square, official, regular script. So how was the art of calligraphy born out of this stiff official writing? Well, these scholars, being human, had to occasionally escape the Confucian rigidity of their official lives. So they were attracted to another philosophy that was the opposite, yet the complement of Confucianism. Taoism, a philosophy that was to profoundly influence the art of the mandarins. The Chinese philosophy of Taoism stresses man's relationship to nature, appealing to the artistic side of humankind. The Tao, or the Way, is the unseen reality behind appearances, the balanced cosmic flow of all things. The first aim of the Chinese artist was to express the perfect harmony of this unseen reality. In their heads Confucian, but in their hearts Taoist, mandarins would escape to relax and write poetry in nature, or if that wasn't possible, in a garden. And in the year 323 AD, that's just what 7 of these scholar officials did, gathering here on the side of a small stream at the Orchid Pavilion, the sacred shrine of Chinese calligraphy. These scholars were escaping from their highly structured official lives, relaxing, waxing lyrical, enjoying a cup of wine to loosen their inhibitions, and having philosophical discussions on the banks of this tiny stream. They were among the first of a long and honored tradition of drunken poets. One scholar was always accompanied by a servant carrying a bottle of wine and a spade with which to dig the scholar's grave. He declared, "To a drunken man, the affairs of this world appear as so much duckweed in the river." After which he floated a cup of wine down the stream to his friend, Wang Xishe, a man who had no idea that he would be revered for all time by the Chinese as the father of calligraphy. In line with Taoist philosophy, the mandarins looked to nature for inspiration. So, while Wang Xishe, a writer of the formal official script, sat meditating, his inspiration arrived with a honk. He was distracted by the natural flowing movements of geese in the pond, movements which he copied with his brush. And so the beautiful flowing grass script was born, raising calligraphy to an abstract art form. His characters, light as a floating cloud, vigorous as a startled dragon, were very different from those of the square, clearly defined official script. Wang Xishe's work is treasured not so much because of what was written, but in how the characters were written. His style embodies the Taoist concept of yin and yang, of everything containing in itself its opposite.
The word you write with this brush, there must be yin-yang. This is Taoist. Yin and yang. Horizontal stroke must be thin. Yin. This is yin. The yang is always thick and yin are always thin. Yang is yang. Yin, yang, yin.
Likewise, in Chinese painting, the concept of yin-yang can be found hidden in the composition. Neighboring trees have a guest-host relationship, the host large and protective, the guest smaller and more modest in bearing. This host-guest principle can be applied to the relation of rock to rock, mountain to mountain, or man to man. So great calligraphy or painting must have this sense of balance, of yin and yang, which the mandarins so treasured.
This is a good piece of calligraphy. Some moist, some dry, some thin, some thick, some big, some small, some big, and some fast, some slow.
In both their lives and their art, they strove to attain a harmonious, balanced relationship between their roles as stern administrators and their more sensitive, artistic, Taoist spirit. No artist was better at doing this, at expressing his personality in his work, than a certain eccentric monk who lived during the 9th century, Zhang Xu. Legend has it that he would walk around drunk and sobbing until he sat down to perform some calligraphic magic. He allowed his brush to gallop across the paper, curling, twisting in one unbroken stroke. The novelty and quality and originality of his work had nobles lining up to buy a sample, and emperors down the centuries scrambling to own some small piece of his genius. This is his work called Cure for Stomachache. It is highly polished by the rubbing of countless scholars who have copied it over the centuries. They copied it not because they suffered from stomachache, but because they could see the indomitable spirit of the man reflected in the way he wrote his characters, making the crazy, wild, yet highly skilled calligraphy a treasured work of art. With Zhang Xu, calligraphy became a visible expression of personality. The mandarins inherited this concept of expressing feelings through artistic creation and adopted it for their own painting, most famously during the 14th century Yuan dynasty, when the native Chinese were conquered and ruled by the Mongols. During this time, the mandarins, who normally would have served at court, found themselves at a loss for what to do, since the Mongols chose not to employ most of them to administer their newly conquered empire. Those scholar officials who were invited to serve faced a terrible dilemma. If they joined the new Mongol administration, they could be branded traitors. If they withdrew out of loyalty to the vanquished Chinese emperor and finished their lives in seclusion, they would be forced to support themselves and their families as best they could with their talents. Most chose the latter path. The best of them, however, did not. Chao Mingfu became a high-ranking official in the Mongol court, and he was despised for it. Nevertheless, he became one of China's most famous artists. His emphasis on the blending of calligraphy, literature, and painting became the ideal for mandarins in later centuries. In this work, he made use of sparse and abbreviated brushstrokes to express his loneliness and inner longing for the open countryside with its mountains and woods. It is an evocation of a state of mind whose symbolic meaning far outweighs its depiction of reality. Nizan, a highly educated man, took the opposite path by refusing office under the Mongols. He was forced to sell the family estate and thereafter lived on a boat on the lakes. He painted in light ink on paper with delicate, dry brushwork. Using crisply etched lines, his paintings depict scene after scene of desolate silence and loneliness.